Okay, welcome everybody to a off-the-record conversation with David Rubenstein, Unplugged, a chance to range widely and go deep on lessons of leadership and patriotism, democracy, the economy, baseball, and more. David, as we know, is an American original. The first in his family to go to college, hailing from the great city of Baltimore. He went to Duke University and then the University of Chicago Law School. He's worked in the Carter White House. He created an extraordinary organization, a business, the Carlyle Group. He has been a pioneering philanthropist. He has chaired more boards than there are boards to chair of nonprofit institutions. He's a great friend of the Aspen Institute, and we can tell from the size of this crowd here, a great friend to all of us in this room. So how do you interview somebody who defies description and is himself a master interviewer? What's your answer to that?
If anybody can do it, you can. No, but let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Are you happy?
I knew it.
So when you took this job, did you have any doubt that it was going to be as much fun as you thought? And what was the biggest challenge of this job?
I knew this was going to be a blast. The Aspen Institute is this global nonprofit that makes a difference in so many ways and places, always trying to bring people together. And like others in this room, you try a new job, you are going into like a new arena, a new field. You think you know what you'll find there. You hope you'll be good at it, but you figure you've got to grow and get better. And so I've had to do that.
Now, you went to Georgetown.
Yes, greatest university in the world.
All right, and you won a Rhodes Scholarship.
That's true, but it wasn't a winning. It was sort of like they gave it to me. It was
you got it, but it's often said that when you win a Rhodes Scholarship, that's the peak of your career, and everything else is downhill because nobody thinks you really do as much as you did to win the Rhodes Scholarship. So what did you actually do to win that Rhodes Scholarship?
Oh, I don't know. I was involved in lots of different community activities at Georgetown. The Jesuits were a big part of my life and developing a worldview that allowed me to make meaning and feel good about life. But this young woman over here, Karen Hurling, is probably the real reason why I feel successful in life, and because I have love in my life. And thank you, Karen, for being here. But I can't let you take over, though. I'll get fired as an interviewer.
I don't think so.
So let me ask you something. Baltimore City College, big place, a lot of talent at City College when you went there. What was it like growing up in Baltimore City?
Baltimore was a blue-collar town then. It's a very unusual town because it's a northern city, you might say, but it's below the Mason-Dixon line. And it was a slave center, honestly, during the Civil War, before the Civil War. But it was a border state. There were 4 border states in the Civil War, which had a lot of slaves, but they didn't secede. And they were Delaware, Tennessee, Kentucky, and Maryland. Baltimore was a very rigidly segregated city when I grew up by religion. The most rigidly segregated city in the United States by religion. In 1948, the Supreme Court of the United States outlawed what's called restrictive covenants, which said the restrictive covenants say you can't sell your home to a Jew or a black or somebody else. And that was outlawed in 1948. Baltimore never got the word. So when I was growing up in the early 50s or so in Baltimore, the Jews could only buy homes in certain areas. And so I grew up in this little Jewish ghetto, blue-collar Jewish ghetto, and I didn't know there was anybody other than people were Jewish. I didn't know anybody was other than Jewish. When I got older, I realized nobody very much is Jewish compared to population. 8 billion people in the world, 13 million Jews. Yeah. But it was a blue-collar town, and it was very rigidly segregated. Italians lived in one area, Germans in another area. And people in Baltimore were very proprietary about where you went to school. And so when you meet somebody from Baltimore, the first question people ask is, where'd you go to high school? Because you can tell so much about where you went to, about your life if you went to high school. I went to a big public high school called Baltimore City College, 3rd oldest public high school in the United States, started in 1839. It was so big that my class was 1,500 people in the class. It was so big the school couldn't afford to have us all go at once. So I went to school 8 a.m. to 12 noon, and then they had another section 1 to 5. So at noon, I have nothing less to do. You could do extracurriculars, you go home or do homework, but it was only 4 hours a day because we had such a big class. And it was a good school, but you know, I had one guidance counselor for the entire class. 1,500 people, we had one guidance counselor. Oh, it was an unusual person. In my class, there was only one person who got into Harvard. One person. He was president of student government, all-state lacrosse player, and you know, maybe near the top of the class. He got into Harvard, and he got arrested for drugs and never graduated from Harvard. And so you never know. You know, I've gone back and met some of my high school friends recently. some of the ones who are the superstars, you think they're going to go to become something important like the head of the Aspen Institute or something. They didn't get that. And then some of the people who weren't so superstars, they were people like me, they got luckier in life.
I want to just add something, because we haven't talked about our lineage, although we've gone to some games together. I want to get to the Orioles. I grew up in a part of town in Baltimore in the 1960s when those restrictive covenants finally broke. And so we had lived in an entirely African-American neighborhood. It's a one white family. My grandmother died. We moved into a row house community over near Mercy Hospital. That was an entirely white community, row houses, and then during the years that we were living there, I was a child, about 8 to 10, the first African-American family. It was actually an African family moved in, first one, and there was a lot of resistance among some in the neighborhood, throwing stuff at their house and scratching their car, and then within like 5 months maybe, half the block became African-American. The other half stayed that were white, and it stabilized, and it actually worked.
It's it's hard for people to understand Baltimore in some respects. There are only 2 cities in the United States that are not in a county. Baltimore's one, and St. Louis is the other. And what does that mean? Well, Baltimore, when I was growing up, had 939,000 people, the 9th biggest city in the United States. Very big. But if you moved out of the city, because it wasn't in the county, if you moved to Baltimore County, all the tax revenues associated with you went to Baltimore County. And so people basically began moving out of the city in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s. I would call it white flight. And the result is that Baltimore went from a city that was 9th biggest in the country, now not even the top 20. This population of Baltimore went from 939,000 or so to about 600,000 or so. It's now 63% African American. And that's because whites have basically moved out of the city, and it still has a lot of challenges, and we're trying to deal with it. The governor was here the other day, and the mayor, but it's got a lot of demographic issues and a lot of challenges. So it's one of these cities that's going to struggle for a while to get back. And I got involved in the Orioles because I wanted to help the city a bit.
Yeah, so let's go there. That was a big leap to become a first-time professional sports owner in your 70s, going back to our hometown, but not a place you'd lived for a long time. And there must have been some joys and some surprises in this early part of the journey. So where are things?
Well, I was a baseball star when I was 7, and but it was a Jewish Little League. And so when I got to a non-Jewish Little League at 8 or 9, I realized I wasn't going to be Sandy Koufax. So I kind of gave up on baseball, and it gave up on me. And I tried out for my high school junior varsity team. And, it's bad when the coach comes up to you afterwards, you had a great tryout, and he says, I think you'd be good to be the manager of the team. The manager is the guy that takes the equipment from place to place, so I didn't do that. So I kind of didn't have a great history with baseball, but I did follow the Orioles a bit. And the Orioles are important to Baltimore for this reason. The reason I bought it was the owner had had it for since I guess he'd had it for maybe 30 years or so. He had Alzheimer's, and his son was running it. And he wasn't very popular in Baltimore, and a lot of other issues I won't go into. And I thought it was a chance to give back to Baltimore. I've given away a fair amount of money, and I hope to give away the bulk of my money in my lifetime, but I didn't do enough for Baltimore. My parents were born there. My parents were raised there. I was born there. I was raised there. My parents are buried there. I'm going to be buried there. And I just thought I hadn't done very much for Baltimore other than I've been the Hopkins board for a while and given money to Hopkins, but I should have done much more. So I thought if I could buy the team and make it, revitalize it, I could help revitalize Baltimore. And so I brought a lot of people in with me who were from Baltimore as investors, and the former, I brought in Cal Ripken, who had not been really deeply involved in the team, brought him back, and Kurt Schmoke, African-American mayor of Baltimore, who was a Rhodes Scholar, a very impressive person, brought him in, and I tried to revive it. And it worked out okay the first year because we did okay, not as good as I wanted. This year we've had some real struggles, and so in the first year I would go to the games and people were cheering for me, and their selfies. Everybody wants a selfie. Everybody wants me to. They have a bobblehead for me, and they want me to. And then, everybody and the 8-year-old kids are coming up. And they want me to sign their baseball. I'm saying, look, my autograph isn't that good because I'm not a player, and I have a bad way of doing autographs because when they taught cursive in the 2nd grade, it was a Jewish holiday, and I was not in school. So I never really did cursive, so I had to print it. And then because I'm a lawyer, I always put the date on the ball. And But this year, nobody's asking for autographs. Nobody wants my picture anymore. I'm walking around, saying, anyone want a picture? You want a picture with me? Nobody wants it.
Yeah.
And so it's been a little quieter with the games, and at least they're not throwing any things or not booing me yet, but well, as they used to say in Brooklyn, we'll get them next year.
Well, don't forget your home team is right here because everybody wants to hear what you're thinking about today. So the economy for a moment.
Okay.
How do we interpret this moment that we're in now?
The U.S. economy has been incredibly resilient, and it's hard to understand how an economy could be this resilient with the challenges we've had. Think about this. When we went into COVID, and everybody remembers COVID, unfortunately, the economy more or less shut down, but we didn't go into a real recession, a technical recession, but not a real recession. And we injected $5 trillion in the economy. We didn't have tax increases to correspondingly to pay for it. That's why we got inflation a bit, went up to 8% or so, but we didn't get a recession. And now I think the economy is in reasonable shape. Our biggest problem, as I said earlier today, is that we have too much debt. We're about 125% of GDP in debt. And that's very, very high. The country, it's never been that high before. We are now running a deficit each year of about $2 trillion. The annual spending of the United States is roughly $7 trillion a year, $7 trillion a year, and we borrow $2 trillion of that. And so right now, because interest rates are high, we are spending over $1 trillion a year to pay interest on the existing debt. And we're going to be spending, with the new beautiful bill, we're going to be spending even more. So that's a big problem, and because we've been able to get away with it because we're the only reserve currency in the world. There's no other reserve currency. So people around the world have been buying dollars for years, and they like it, but now the dollar is going down a bit because of some policies we have and because we have too much debt. There is a risk, I think, at some point that the reserve currency will not only be the dollar, it will be something else. The economy has been helped in the last couple of years by the explosive growth of technology. We dominate the world in technology, dominate it in a way that we never did before in previous decades. For example, as I probably said earlier today, but I want to repeat it for those who weren't there, I don't think anybody in this room can get by during the day without using an American technology that's controlled by Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Facebook, Netflix. We're dependent on these because our life depends on it. And you think about it, how many European technologies do you really depend on? Virtually none. And that Europe has fallen way behind. China is caught up with us in some areas. There is one technology that we all seem to be addicted to called TikTok. But other than that, China has not put any technologies into the American bloodstream yet that we are so dependent on. And so I think the economy will be okay, but I do worry about the debt, and I worry about the dysfunction of the U.S. government. The U.S. government was set up by the Founding Fathers, and we're going to celebrate the 250th anniversary next year. It was set up in a different way than we're now operating, in my view. It was supposed to have a checks and balances system, which doesn't quite exist now. And I'm afraid that we have some real challenges that we have to deal with. But on the whole, I wouldn't trade being an American for being a citizen of any other country. And the fact that 49 million people have come to this country as immigrants shows you where people really want to be. No other country in the world has as many immigrants. We have, I think Germany may have 7 or 8 million, but nobody's even close because people believe in the American dream. They come here, and many people who are born here don't believe in the American dream as much as people who now come here. But the country has a lot of strengths, a lot of natural resources, a lot of talented people, great universities. I hope we don't destroy them. Very talented entrepreneurial spirit, a democracy that I hope we can preserve and continue and expand. But we have some challenges.
So, you have, maybe above anybody I've met, assigned yourself the job of supporting great American institutions, of making available to the public stories of the history and founding and key values of our country, and trying to do your part to renew constantly that belief the population has that we are the America that you and I love. You've assigned it to yourself. Nobody told you, like, hey, David, this is your job now.
Let me explain how that happened. It was fortuitous. I wasn't sitting at home saying, what can I do more to be a better American citizen? What can I do to help the country more? What can I do to give back to the country? Like most things in life, it happened by serendipity. There were 2 serendipitous events. The first one was an investment banker sent me an invitation to go look at the Magna Carta, which I wasn't all that interested in. It was at a viewing in New York. It happened to be at Sotheby's. I didn't put 2 and 2 together. It turned out when I got there, the curator said, this is going to be auctioned tomorrow. It's the only one in private hands, and it's going to leave the United States because likely buyers are from Russia, Saudi Arabia, And she said South Africa. And I thought, wait, this is the only one in private hands. It's the inspiration of the Declaration of Independence. Of the 17 extant copies, we should keep one in the United States. So I resolved to go back and buy it the next day at the auction. But I didn't want to tell anybody because it sounds presumptuous to say I'm going to go buy the Magna Carta. And I didn't want to tell my children. They'd say, how much less money might this mean for us? So I went back the next day, and I really was not, at that point, I didn't buy anything at Art at Sotheby's. I went there, and they put me in a little room. I said, no, I want to sit there and put my paddle up, and I know you don't want people to see you doing this. So they put me in a little room, and they give you a telephone, and they start the auction. And all of a sudden, there's bidding, and the auctioneer's bidding, taking bids, and the person says on the phone, well, you haven't said anything. You're not going to bid? I said, well, I'm not sure yet. They said, well, you better bid soon or you're going to lose. I said, okay, I put in a bid, and 1 second later, they said, sold. So I'm wondering, is anybody else really bidding, or was I the only bidder? So I got it, and I decided to give it to the, on a permanent loan, and when I die, it'll go there to the National Archives, where you can see it now, and it's an 800-year-old document in pretty good shape for 800 years old. And then, so I did that, and then I started buying other documents, the Emancipation Proclamation, the 13th Amendment, the Declaration of Independence, and I probably own more copies of the Declaration of Independence than anybody, including the U.S. government. I lend my copies to the U.S. government, and I bought a lot of the things. Lincoln signed more than a few copies of the Emancipation Proclamation. I bought these, and what's the point of buying these? Well, I'm going to explain it in 1 minute. But the other serendipitous thing was this. I was chair of the Kennedy Center. Some of you may remember this. I was chair of the Kennedy Center, and on the board was the head of the Park Service. And one day in 2011, I think it was, there was an earthquake in Washington, D.C. And they said the Washington Monument had cracks and was not in good shape. So I called the head of the Park Service and said, what's the problem? How much money is going to take? How long is it going to take? He said, it's going to take me a couple of years to get the money out of Congress. It's complicated. So I said, forget the Congress. I'll put up the money. And I was shocked that people were surprised that an American citizen would put up the money to fix the Washington Monument. So they fixed it and so forth. Then the other Congress said, well, can we get some credit by putting up some money too? So I said, okay, I don't care. So we fixed it up. And then I started fixing up other historic buildings. The Mount Vernon, Monticello, Montpelier, Custis Lee Mansion at the top of Arlington Cemetery, the Iwo Jima Memorial, and other things. And why did I do that? And why did I buy the documents? Let me explain. All of us are Homo sapiens. And all of us came out of caves roughly 400,000 years ago. And when we came out of caves, it wasn't obvious to the animals, most likely in Africa, southern Africa, that we were going to dominate the world. You know, we weren't as big as other animals, we weren't as fast, we weren't as strong, but we dominated the world over the next 400,000 years and today because we have the brain. The brain is the greatest thing anybody has ever created, God or whoever created it. It's an incredible device, and the brain works a certain way. Now, it will change in certain ways. The brain has enabled people to come up with Einstein theories, enabled Picasso to paint what he did, it enabled Beethoven to do what he did. It's an incredible tool, and it has a couple flaws. One of the flaws is because of the way that humans evolved, they were very afraid of enemies attacking them in the early days. So the brain evolved that if you look different than me, I'm going to be upset with you, I might attack you. And that's one of the reasons why I think we still have prejudice, racial prejudice, other kinds of prejudice, because the human brain still thinks if you look different than me, you think differently than me, I'm not going to be happy with you. Another flaw that we have is that right now, if you see something on a computer slide, it's not the same as seeing it in person. And so maybe you could say it's a flaw, maybe it's not a flaw, but in 100 years from now, 200 years from now, 500 years from now, if you want to see the Magna Carta, push a button, and you'll see it on a slide, and it'll be the same experience for you. Today, the human brain has not yet evolved to the point where if you go to visit the Washington Monument, you go up and see it, it's not the same experience as just seeing on a computer, because the computer doesn't give you everything. When you go to see the Washington Monument, you're more likely than not going to have a curator explain it to you, more likely than not read about it afterwards. You might read about it before. So what I'm trying to do is to get people to think about the history of the country, and why is that important? Because if you preserve these documents, you preserve these buildings, more people will see them, it's a better experience, and then they'll learn more about history. Why is that important? The theory of history is that those people that don't remember history are condemned to relive the mistakes of the past. So the reason we study history is because we want to avoid the mistakes of the past, and therefore I want to get people to study more American history if we can. Right now, we don't teach American history very much anymore, because if you follow school curriculums, parents are obsessed with something called STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. The theory is if you want a job at Google or Facebook or Goldman Sachs, you got to be a STEM major. It used to be when I was in college, 9% of college graduates or college students were history majors. Now it's about 1.5%. Because people are afraid if they get a history major, they won't get a job at Google or Facebook or something like that. It's unfortunate, but that's the reality. And so this is my little way of saying, let's remind people of the history and heritage of the country, remember the great things that we did in the past and the bad things we did in the past, and then hopefully we have more informed citizens. As Jefferson said when he did some of his early works, that a representative democracy only works if you have an informed citizenry. And to the extent that we don't have an informed citizenry, democracy is not going to work that much. So that's the reason for it. It's a long-winded way I'm explaining it.
That's a great answer. And it is a highly rational answer. And I know it's the truth. I'm learning from the David Rubenstein School of Interviewing.
Okay.
Keep the other person from being sure what you're going to ask next.
Okay.
Still, you're the first in your family to go to college. You're a Horatio Alger Award winner. You came out of a place and time in Baltimore where you could never, as a child, have imagined the life you've been able to create for yourself and for others. And so as you do these things in support of our country and history and our documents and our buildings, what's the feeling inside of you that also drives it?
Well, you know, the greatest feeling, the strongest magnetic force in the world is not gravity. And by the way, the problem with gravity, I've learned, is it gets stronger as you get older. And I have observed that climate change is not as big a problem as gravity. And as I get older, gravity is getting stronger. But the strongest magnetic force is the power between a Jewish mother and a Jewish son. And so I, to some extent, of course, I wanted to make my parents proud, and I was their only child. My mother didn't really understand what I was doing. She was not a college or high school graduate. And the only time she was really excited was when Carlisle bought Dunkin' Donuts, and I gave her free coupons to buy coffee at Dunkin' Donuts because she went there every morning, and she went to go in and say, "My son owns Dunkin' Donuts," and the lady would say, "Oh, sure, lady." But you know, my parents were proud, obviously, that I did something useful with my life. But in the end, what is life all about? Life is about, I assume, having happiness. We don't know exactly what creates happiness, but it varies from time to time and thing to thing. But all of us want to do something with our lives that you feel that you're making yourself happy. And how do you get happiness? Well, to some extent, it's by helping other people. Generally, the very wealthy people that don't help other people, they're pretty sad souls. I know a lot of tortured multi-billionaires. They're really miserable. They got their big art collections and their yachts, and they really have no friends. They have no happiness. Happiness comes from helping other people. And I think that what I've been trying to do is to give back to the country that made it possible for me, the grandson of immigrants, to feel like I've done something useful with my life. All of us get to the point in life where you say, okay, what am I doing here? What have I done with my life? And in the end, what we really want to do is make your parents, I think, proud, if they're still alive, or and make your children proud of you, which is a lot harder, as all of you know. My children have no interest in any of the things I'm doing. I try to explain what I'm doing, and they're just not that interested. But maybe eventually they will be. But at some point, you want to feel like you've done something useful with your life. Help your community, help your country, help your neighborhood, and help your society. And that's what I get the greatest pleasure out of doing that.
Well, and you've done so much to help us treasure enduring values and enduring national identity and commitments. So here's a hard moment, though, because the pace of change is escalating rapidly. Some of that's politics, some of that's the economy, some of that's technology, some is demographics, but it's almost dizzying how fast change is coming. And yet you are helping us, or trying to help us, hold on to certain kinds of eternal values. So what do you advise leaders, and any of us, as we are working in a world of such fast change?
Well, obviously, the older people are not the ones that adapt to change as quickly as the younger people, so I'm not probably the best person to give advice on it. But I think what leaders have to do, to be a great leader, you have to know where you want to go. You can't say, I'm not sure where I want you to follow me, but I want you to follow me. You can't do that. You got to say, here's where I'm taking you. You have to learn how to communicate what you want people to do. And the way you communicate is by writing well, You don't have to be Abraham Lincoln writing the Gettysburg Address, but learn how to write so that people can understand and want to follow you. Or learn how to talk well. You don't have to be Martin Luther King at the Lincoln Memorial, but learn how to express yourself so people want to follow you. Or you can do what other people do, which is the most effective way of communicating it, to lead by example. When George Washington was at Valley Forge in 1777, he didn't go down to the Ritz-Carlton down the street. He stayed there with his troops. And it was an example that they followed, and they really, felt he was a real leader. So if you're a leader, you gotta know where you're taking people, learn how to communicate, and also share the blame, and don't take all the credit. In other words, if something goes wrong, you can say, it's my fault, or maybe I didn't do everything right. But when something good happens, share the credit with people. And also, a trait that I think is really great that some leaders that we may know about don't have, but it's one that I think is good. It's called humility. And, can you see Abraham Lincoln running around the White House saying, I just signed the Emancipation Proclamation, aren't I great? Or I just gave the Gettysburg Address, or I just won the Civil War all by myself. I did it all by myself. Or signing the Emancipation Proclamation, which was an executive order, and going around like this, saying, hey, you see the executive order I just signed? It's the Emancipation Proclamation. Humility is something that I think is really a great thing in great leaders, and I admire people that have it. And then really great leaders, I think, have that. And obviously, there are always exceptions of people that do great things or do some wonderful things that don't have all those traits. But that's what I think those are the traits I think a leader should have. And be ethical, highly ethical.
So because you are so revered, and especially in this room, I know that when some read about what was happening at the Kennedy Center, they were both reading about it as a sort of a national thing, and then also as hey, our friend David is going through something difficult. You share any thoughts about that experience?
Well, let me describe it. I was a young boy in Baltimore, and John Kennedy drove by my house, and he waved. Now, I don't know if he was really waving at me, but I thought he was. And he obviously wasn't. But I got inspired by John Kennedy, and my generation got into public service, inspired by John Kennedy. And so I just wanted to give back things and do things connected to Kennedy. So I went to work in a law firm when I graduated from law school with Ted Sorensen, who was the brilliant speechwriter that Kennedy had. And then I got involved with, I guess I became the biggest donor to the Kennedy Center, to the Kennedy Library in Boston, and to the Kennedy School at Harvard. Maybe because I just had this, man crush on John Kennedy. Whatever his flaws were, we now know we have more of them than we realized at the time. But he was an incredible talent and political talent. And at the Kennedy Center, I became the chair of it 14 years ago. I gave the Kennedy Center about $110 or $20 million something, and I rebuilt it a bit, and I really enjoyed it. But what happened, and I had dinner with President Trump a summer ago before he was elected, and he didn't really mention anything about the Kennedy Center. I know when the first time he was president, when Norman Lear got the honors, Kennedy Center honors, he didn't want to go shake the hands of President Trump at the White House ceremony we used to have. So I had to call President Trump and say, Norman Lear's not coming, the others don't want to come, and he wasn't happy, and he said he wasn't going to come to the show, and that went on for 4 years. I thought I could fix it, but it didn't quite work out. So this time around, I didn't see, he had a lot of other things that are more important at Kennedy Center, but I think he was lobbied by some people who were MAGA supporters who thought they should have gotten a Kennedy Center honor, and they didn't get it. And therefore, he was upset about it. And then I think somebody said there had been a drag show at the Kennedy Center. I didn't think there was. I never heard of a drag show. Somebody had rented the Kennedy Center, which you can then, and somebody put some drag show on. But, I didn't really know about it. And then what also happened was I think that, some people, weren't happy that President Biden had put a lot of people on the White House staff on the Kennedy Center board. And right at the last minute, President Biden gave me the Presidential Medal of Freedom before he left office, and he gave it to me with a lot of people who, some people didn't like. They were liberal Democrats, and somebody watching it didn't like it. And so all those things came together, and somebody convinced President Trump to name himself as chairman. I never, I'm the first person in the history of the country to be fired by a president and also succeeded by him. He took my job, and he's made himself the chairman, and he's now the chairman. And after he what fired me, he invited me to come see him at the Oval Office, and I did. Not to apologize, that's not his strong suit, and I talked to him for a while, and I went into the meeting, and he said, David, how do you like the way I've redecorated the Oval Office? I said, well, you got a lot of portraits here of Republican presidents. You got a lot of them. He said, yeah. I said, where'd you get them? He said, I got them from the National Gallery of Art. I said, well, you know, I'm the chairman of that. You want that job too? And he said, should I? I don't know. So, no, he didn't want that job. But I'd say, you know, 14 years is a long time to be chairman. That's probably long enough. I was actually trying to retire, and I was going to be succeeded by a well-known person, Democrat, but that person decided not to do it when Trump was elected, so I agreed to stay on for 2 more years. I was actually going to, you know, I was trying to get out of it after 14 years. It's long enough to be the chairman of something like that. But, you know, it's life, and, you know, my mother's not alive, so she didn't see me being fired by the president. She wouldn't have understood why the president was firing me. She probably did something wrong. But anyway, the Kennedy Center's got some challenges now, and the other cultural institutions in Washington, I've been involved in all of them. I was the chair of the Smithsonian. I'm the chair of the Library of Congress Board. I'm the chair of the National Gallery of Art. I'm the biggest donor to the National Archives. And all of those institutions have some real problems now. And they've been fending off pushes from the White House to replace people, and we've been trying to fight back a bit. And in some cases, like the National Gallery of Art, none of the trustees are appointed by the president, so it's a little harder to fire them. And at the Library of Congress, the Library of Congress is a terrific person, Carla Hayden, was fired. You know, she's a black woman appointed by Obama, and that was probably a bridge too far for some people to tolerate. So she was fired, unfortunately. But we've made it to keep other people from fixing or hurting the Library of Congress. Smithsonian has its challenges. 19 museums, great place, but there's a lot of stress there right now. And originally, the Doge people said they wanted to close down the African American History and Culture Museum completely, but we've prevented that from the time being. But anyway, it's a challenge. But this time, this will pass in time, and ultimately, these are great institutions that the country should be very proud of. And you know, I hope all of you have a chance to visit them, because your taxpayer dollars have made these things the best in the world. We have the best library in the world, the best Smithsonian, the best museum set in the world, Smithsonian, and the Kennedy Center, I think, is one of the greatest performing arts centers in the country, certainly. But it's a difficult time, and hopefully it'll get a little bit better.
Well, on behalf of the whole country, can we all say thank you for everything?
Thanks. Thank you.
So this packed house is like a town hall meeting, and so I want to open it up to questions earlier than we otherwise would, to just get some more ideas out in the mix. We've got about 17 minutes to go. I can't call on everybody I know. We'll start here on the right. If we have short questions and short answers, we'll have more excitement. Go.
Glenn Youngkin, your former colleague, too young to become president? Someday?
For those who don't know, Glenn Youngkin was somebody I hired 25 years ago out of McKinsey. Very smart guy. He worked for me for 25 years. He rose up to be my successor as the leader of Carlyle. Then he left for complicated reasons, and then he decided to get into politics. I said, Glenn, you have no chance of winning anything. You've never been run for anything. He got elected governor. Glenn kept Trump away from campaigning for him. He didn't want to, to get the nomination, it's a convention in Virginia, so he had to have a lot of MAGA supporters, but he didn't want Trump to come in, so he kind of wanted to have Trump sort of say something good about him, but didn't want to see him physically there. And it worked. He got elected governor. His term is up at the end of this year. It's a 4-year term. It's the only state in the country where you only can serve one consecutive term. So Glenn's dilemma is this. If MAGA is very popular, and Trump wants a MAGA successor, i.e. Vance and or his son, to succeed him, and MAGA is popular, that's probably where the Republican Party is going to go. If MAGA is not that popular for other economic, social, political reasons, then somebody who's a more moderate Republican will have a chance. And in that category, Glenn would do reasonably well, in my view, but he can't get the nomination without having some MAGA support. So I suspect when his term is up, President Trump will appoint him to some commission, a board that'll give him some MAGA contacts, but I don't think he wants to go work in the cabinet, because once you're in the cabinet, you're a full MAGA supporter or you're fired. And so I don't think Glenn will go. But Glenn is a very talented guy. We could do a lot worse as President of the United States than Glenn Youngkin.
All right, let's take 3 questions in a row. If you say it in one sentence, you get a David Rubenstein bobblehead doll.
Right.
So we'll go 1, 2, 3.
What keeps you up at night and what brings you peace?
All right.
Well,
no, hold on.
okay.
Number 2.
How does the DMV survive the current administration?
What was the second?
How does the DMV, District of Columbia, Maryland, Virginia, survive the current Trump
Yeah,
administration? Okay. And then number 3.
And mine won't be a sentence, but it's okay for the bobblehead. So my organization, Parity Homes, we're based out of Baltimore. And David, every time I speak to you, I forget to ask you this one question. So Baltimore has 15,000 vacant buildings due to
Right.
redlining and white flight. And I started my company, I'm a fellow here, I started it specifically to tackle the vacancy issue. Now, it's very difficult to tackle because investors think that there's not a market because of the presence of vacants. What Parity does is we actually first create the social capital and the demand.
Right.
We've actually pre-sold all of our homes, and we've proven that there's high demand. So what's exciting, we just heard Governor Westmore speak last night. He's mobilizing $3 billion for the city of Baltimore to tackle
Right.
the vacancy issue.
Right.
So I have to provide that context
Okay.
because my question to you is, what do you see as the economic levers for the Orioles? Of course, winning games is a big economic lever. Bringing more population into the city is a huge lever. More people buying tickets and jerseys to your games. But what else do you see as a lever for your team?
Okay, so on the first question, when you're a 75-year-old white man or black man, there are a lot of other things keep you up at night. But I think the thing I most worry about in the country is that we have a democracy that has worked pretty well for 250 years. It had the birth defect of slavery, and we've had the challenges of Jim Crow and all the discrimination and the anti-Semitism and other things we have in the country. But on balance, democracy has worked reasonably well, not perfectly, of course. And I do worry that we're going into a system now where it seems like the other branches are kind of neutered and don't really want to be the checks and balances that the system was designed to have. And I think that's not a good thing. And so I worry about that. I also worry about our country's economy in terms of the debt we have. And I also worry about whether in the younger people, when they're growing up, you know, whether they're going to feel this country is as great as I felt it was when growing up, and whether they're going to really want to push to make the country better, or whether they'll leave the country, which we've never really seen people leaving this country other than for tax reasons. But people used to think this was the best place to be. So I do worry about all of that. Your question was the DMV.
Yeah.
The nation's capital is surrounded by, Virginia and Maryland, and they have a heavy federal workforce, obviously. That workforce is being reduced a bit, or maybe more than a bit, and I do think there's a higher degree of unemployment that's going to be in Virginia and in Maryland than would be otherwise the case, and that's unfortunate. And I also think that right now the District of Columbia still has some legitimate problems. For example, we have about a population of the District of Columbia is about 650,000 people, but doesn't have any votes in the Congress. And so the country started with the principle of no taxation without representation, yet we have the District of Columbia, they have no votes in Congress, and that's unfortunate. I think that the District and the Maryland and Virginia have some unique problems because of the federal workforce, and as the federal workforce goes down, I think it's going to be some economic problems there. In terms of the housing situation, as I said to you earlier, you should make your company a for-profit company, and then you could get some investors. It's easier to get money from investors who think they might get a modest profit. You now have a 501c3 that what she does is buys very, very beat-up houses, reconstructs them, and then sells them for a profit, but the profit is really not a profit that goes to you or your shareholders because it's a nonprofit. But if I were you, I would keep my nonprofit, and then I would have a for-profit subsidiary so you can get some investors who might put money in, and then they might say, I'll put in money, and you might ask them, I'll put in a dollar for dollar. In other words, put a dollar in the for-profit subsidiary, and then put a dollar contribution in the nonprofit.
For the record, we've raised $10 million.
I'm sorry?
For the record, we've raised $10 million.
Okay, but it's for a nonprofit.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm saying investors who want to make a profit, I would have another subsidiary, but that's a whole separate issue.
I'm going to go one back there, one back here, and then I'm going to cold call because I'm a former professor.
Okay.
So from this side, yes, please stand up.
David, have we had a failure in corporate leadership in this country to speak out against Trump policies such as the big, beautiful bill that we're seeing?
Great question.
Good question.
So have we had a failure in corporate leadership?
Okay.
Corporate leaders not
Yes,
speaking out?
let me talk about that. Leaving the entrepreneurs aside, entrepreneurs are people that build companies, they break through walls, they're used to starting things. Generally, to rise up in a big company, you have to get along with people and please your bosses. You don't usually rise up by pissing off your bosses. So people that are the big CEOs of the big companies, they generally know how to get along with other people and kind of work their way to the top. That's not generally a mindset that produces people that are going to say, I want to be very critical of the federal government and very critical of the president. In this case, President Trump, for whether you like him or not, he obviously is vindictive in times, and he doesn't forget slights, and he will criticize you and very publicly. And so a lot of the CEOs are just not willing to take that on. Privately, when you meet with the Business Roundtable, you meet with the Business Council, I'm a member of that, these CEOs will say privately things they just don't want to say publicly because of the retribution that could happen to their company. And so you're seeing things that you haven't seen before. Generally, business people are not afraid to speak out somewhat, but now I think they're more afraid. So I think it's a bit of a challenge to get CEOs willing to speak out because they're afraid they're going to hurt their company if they do.
I want to go to the back of this room. Any hands here? Yes, with the lanyard. Yeah.
Why do you feel like people are less proud to be American now than they were in the past?
Okay, hold that thought. Why are people less proud, or some, to be an American in the past? Now I am cold calling right to my right, Sheila Johnson, who is our partner in the Aspen Institute, who runs the Salamander Resorts, which operates this campus and 6 or 7 other places all around the country and world. Sheila, would you mind standing up? Because she has no idea, but
Hi.
I watched you interview her on stage at the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, so fair play to turnabout. So question for David.
Okay, first of all, how do you like all the improvements that we've been able to do?
I think they're spectacular, and I don't know, what's the highest grade you can give to a hotel? 6 or something like that, or 6-star?
yeah, 5.
I think you did a great job, and congratulations on doing that. And the Salamander has done a great job in Washington, D.C. The hotel you bought there has done pretty well. And for those who don't know, Sheila built a hotel that nobody thought could be built in Middleburg, Virginia, built it from scratch, and having a woman who was African American build something in a white area of Middleburg, Virginia, was not easy to get done, and she got it done. Now it's a very successful hotel. So congratulations.
Yep.
And she's the only woman who owns part of a professional hockey team, professional basketball team, and a professional women's basketball team as well. So
Yes.
So my second question to you, are you having fun owning Major League Baseball?
Okay, let's go with the question of pride first, and then we'll come back to are you having fun.
All right, the first question was pride. I think Americans generally are proud of their country, but most people are proud of their country. Very few people are not proud of their country. As a general rule, obviously people are not proud of their country, they often leave, but I think most countries, if you go around the world, and I've traveled to probably 100 different countries, most people are proud of their country, and most Americans are proud of their country, though they're not happy with everything being done. Are they as proud today as they were 6 months ago? Maybe not. But in the end, these things will pass, I think. And I don't think we're making permanent changes in the government, but I think if Donald Trump Jr. were to be the next president of the United States, and then, Donald Trump III were to be president after him, that might be a bit of a challenge. But I think generally, I think some people are not that happy right now. But remember, President Trump, he got elected twice, and there is a large percentage of the population that really supports him. And for those who don't understand the support, I think you just have to understand that there's a large percentage of people in this country who are not college educated. and 60% of adults in this country are not college educated. Many of them in the Midwest or South, and the people that kind of are written about in the Hillbilly Elegy book, they are people that saw globalization as something taking their jobs away. They are people that see immigrants coming in, taking their jobs, see Jews coming in, taking their jobs, see Muslims coming in, taking their jobs, and many of these people are just not happy with what they've seen. And Donald Trump, although he's from a wealthy family and a wealthy business person and lives in New York City, was able to capture this frustration in ways that politicians who came from poor backgrounds never could. And so he's clearly representing a 35% or so of the population or more that really is not happy with the direction of the country. And I think he's trying to make some changes. Whether he gets all these things done or not, I don't know. But I think a lot of people in the country have some real angst about where we're going. And I share some of that angst.
And yet, are you having fun owning a professional sports franchise?
Well, the other day we scored 22 runs and we won. And when you score 22 runs in a game, that's great. But then the next day we lost. It's fun, but it's more fun to win than lose. And I don't really have the ability to tell the players how to do anything. It's I don't really the players are young. I'm 75. We have players that are 21 years old. What am I going to tell? I went in and we had a pep talk at the beginning of the season, and I was making references to Thomas Jefferson and John Adams. And a lot of these guys have not even, and remember, a lot of people don't even speak English on the team. We have one Japanese player who doesn't speak a word of English. We have a lot of people from the Dominican Republic, so I don't think they understand a word of what I'm saying. One time I went early to a game. I was making a speech for Mike Milken on prostate cancer, and I saw one of our 21-year-old players, and he said, "What are you doing in the clubhouse?" And I said, "I'm about to make a speech for Mike Milken's prostate cancer event." He said, "Well, what's a prostate?" And I said, "You'll learn eventually." But it's fun when you win, but it's difficult because I feel like I don't have the ability to really change the player's performance, so I feel like I'm a little frustrated. I can't really, and in private equity, I can maybe help them a little bit here and there, but I can't really tell the players what to do. I did go on spring training, though. I did go down and get in the batting cage, and there's a reason why I'm not a professional baseball player. But anyway, it's fun. It's just the thing that's surprising is this. I've been the CEO of Carlisle for a long time, and we've owned hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of companies, and none of those companies ever got as much attention as one baseball team, which is a relatively small operation. The baseball teams make maybe revenue of maybe $150, $200 million a year. They're relatively small business. Carlisle owns companies that have billions of dollars of revenues. Nobody ever pays attention to those. It's amazing how much attention is paid to by these teams. And for Baltimore, it's important because Baltimore lost its hockey team. It was stolen away, not stolen. It went down the route to Washington, and then we lost our basketball team. Those are the teams you own, so we lost those in Baltimore. And then our Colts, one time in the middle of the night, they moved to Indianapolis. We have a football team there, but it's not the Colts. So Baltimore is part of the DNA of the city, and we came to the city in 1954. The purchase price was $2.2 million to buy the team. 1954. I paid $1.7 billion. So I don't know whether I'm going to be able to sell it to anybody who's going to pay that kind of increased premium, but I enjoy it. I just wish I could do more to make the team better.
All the way back on the left, yes, yeah.
What is the best balance between decreasing spending and increasing taxation, and why has no president, Democratic or Republican, been able to deal with?
Okay. Look, President tried. Under President Obama, he appointed the Bowles-Simpson Commission. You may remember this. It was designed to come up with some ways to deal with the problem. Because they proposed things like increasing the age of retirement for Social Security recipients to be able to collect Social Security, but 10 years down the road or so, even that was so unpopular that he never actually had a picture and never met with the Bowles-Simpson people. The report went to the White House, but President Obama, who appointed him, never even wanted to meet with him because it was so unpopular. The problem is this. Our budget is roughly, say, $7 trillion a year. 85% of it is defense spending, interest on the debt, and entitlements. Entitlements are Medicaid, Medicare, veterans benefits, and Social Security. And if you have 85% of the budget, it's kind of hard to move. You only have 15% to play with. And so how much can you really cut the National Endowment for the Arts and National Endowment for the Humanities? Just not much. So nobody really wants to propose tax increases, because when you propose them, usually you lose elections. When you propose spending cuts, and the only place you really can do it is the entitlement ones, and very unpopular. So there's no easy way out of it. The only way out of it, the way you can solve the debt problem, these are the solutions. Increase taxes, nobody wants to do that. Cut spending, nobody wants to do that. Go to the IMF for a bailout. Obviously, we're too big for a bailout. Just default and say, look, we're sorry, we borrowed too much money. Companies default all the time. We're defaulting. Obviously, you can't do that. You only have two real solutions. You can increase your GDP so that your growth rate is such you've got much more tax revenue coming in. But an economy of roughly, our economy is roughly $30 trillion economy. You can't grow at 6%, 7% a year. We're lucky to grow at 2% a year. So you're not going to increase your revenue that much from tax receipts being up because the GDP is higher. The only other solution is the one that we all in this room probably don't have to worry about as much. Our children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren are going to pay off this debt in devalued dollars. The dollars that will be paying off the debt in 25 years are going to be worth a lot less than the dollars we have today. That's the only solution. There's no other way around it that I can see, unless we're going to change our policy and increasing taxes and cutting Social Security benefits or other benefits. It's just a very frustrating thing. Politicians like to stay in office. And I host a dinner for members of Congress once a month. And I do it doing it for 11 years. And it's designed to get Democrats and Republicans to talk to each other without the press there, and they can fraternize and actually get to know each other, because they're usually not allowed to do that. And members love it. They say it's the best thing you're doing in Congress is actually going to this dinner, which is sad, because that's the best thing you're doing in Congress, going to this dinner. But I interview a historian in front of them to educate them about history a bit. And you know, it's a good thing to do, but members of Congress, it's a bizarre thing. When you talk to a member of Congress, they're obsessed with not losing their election, obsessed with not losing. Yet when they lose or they retire, they say to me, David, I'm never so happy, never so happy. And you saw today, if you watched the news today, Senator from North Carolina, Senator Tillis, basically said he didn't want to deal with a primary challenge led by President Trump. He decided to retire at the end of his term. And that's what you get. Members don't want to put up with the aggravation very often, but very often most members just are afraid of losing. And so let me just conclude with one story from this dinner. I've told this before to some people here, but when I interview people, I try to interview them and educate members of Congress. And one time, I tried to interview somebody I thought that Congress should know something about, and that was the Chief Justice of the United States. His name is John Roberts. And I'd known him for a long time because he's the Chancellor of the Smithsonian, and I was the chair for a while. So I said to him, Mr. Chief Justice, did you always want to be Chief Justice of the United States? Expecting him to say, of course, I always wanted that. I was a lawyer. He said, no, I never wanted to be Chief Justice. Well, when you were little, did you want to be a judge? No. Did you want to be a lawyer? No, I didn't want to be a lawyer either. What did you want to be? I wanted to be an American historian. All I cared about was American history. I loved American history. My father said, John, you'll starve to death. You will never make any money. You won't be able to support a family. And John said, I don't care. I love American history. I don't want to be a lawyer. I don't care about money. Okay, so he went to Harvard, and he majored in American history. Came back his junior year, got in a cab at Logan Airport, and said to the cab driver, please take me to Cambridge. And the cab driver said, are you a student at Harvard? He said, yes, I am. What are you majoring in? Cab driver, and then John said, well, I'm majoring in American history. And the cab driver said, well, when I was a student at Harvard, that's what I majored in also.
On that note, thank you all. David Rubenstein.
Thanks a lot.
Unplugged.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Great.
Thank you. That was great.